Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. It is great to see you all and wonderful group joining us today. My name is Wyatt. I'm the Deputy Director of Global Admissions for Schwarzman Scholars. So happy you're here, and most of all, so thrilled that you are applying for Schwarzman Scholars for the 11th cohort, the class of 2026-2027. I am so honored and happy today to be joined by my amazing team of members who are so committed to this work, and many of you have met many of them already, I'm sure, as you've interacted with us around the world, both in person and virtually. So I'm just going to kick us off and ask my colleagues to introduce ourselves, and we will get started. So Tracy, over to you to start us off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Ginyard. I am an admissions and selection officer on the admissions team. Pop it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sarah Fisher. I'm a Global Outreach Associate, and I'm very excited to see everyone. Jason, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. My name is Jason Rathman. I'm an admissions outreach and selection officer. I've been with Schwarzman Scholars now for a little bit over 2 years, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to pass it off to Tom.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Tomesco. You can see my first and last names both start with T-O-M, so you can call me Tom Tom if you like. And I am also an outreach and selections officer on the admissions team. Over to you, Nikima.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikima Stevenson, and I'm the newest addition to the admissions team here as an admissions and outreach and selection officer. So I'm really excited to meet you all soon.
Fantastic. Well, welcome again, everyone, and thanks, team. We are very excited as we get the official countdown here. We are 7 days, 3 hours, and 57 minutes away from our U.S. Global Admissions deadline for the 11th cohort of Schwarzman Scholars. This is one of the most exciting times of the year for us. As a team, we've been out and about in the world. We've probably met many of you in different sessions, both virtually and in person around the world. And we are so excited that you're considering clicking submit on your application to Schwarzman Scholars. And we're really here to walk through this process with you and support you in any way that we can as we approach the deadline. We will be sharing a variety of resources today. I just want to kick off and let you know from the beginning some of the resources that are already available to you that you may or may not know about yet. Sarah is going to kindly put these links in our chat for the Zoom call today, just so you have the direct links to bookmark. The first one is our application instructions page. So we've actually been very thoughtful to take every single section of the application and kind of give you our advice on that section of the application. So I encourage you, as you continue to work on your application and get ready to click submit, just to have that page open as you go through the various sections of the application. That's directly on our schwarzmanscholars.org website. Also on our site, we have an FAQ page, which answers a lot of questions both about the application process and the kind of upcoming selection timeline, including our interviews. And then we've also put together an application tips page on our website, as well as directly from our team. So we work to think about the many applicants we've supported over the years and kind of the nuance of our selection process to give you some specific advice on how to best articulate your leadership narrative, how to share your vision for the future, the impact that you want to have, the question you want to solve, that issue that keeps you up at night that you want to be a part of coming up with a solution for, and really putting your best foot forward as you think about why you want to join this network of leaders from around the world who are working together across borders, across time zones, disciplines, and industries to really build a more collaborative world for us all. So hope that is helpful for you. We're also accessible over the next week as we approach the deadline as well. If you have any technical issues with your application, we encourage you to reach out to apptech@schwarzmanscholars.org, and we'll get back to you with support there. And if you have any inquiries about the application or any part of the process, feel free to reach out to us at admissions@schwarzmanscholars.org as well. Just a couple of best practices for our call together today. We are going to use the Q&A function of the chat, of the Zoom call, so that will allow us to see your questions and try to answer as many of them as we can during our time together. And we're going to kick off today by just kind of doing a popcorn session with our team here of experts here today, giving you some advice on the application. So as I mentioned, we've all worked with many applicants throughout our time at Schwarzman Scholars, and have kind of come up with some best practices and advice to help set you up for success in the process. So we're going to take a few sections of the application and just talk through them and give you some input. And I'm going to kick it over to my colleague Tom to kick us off and talk about the bio.
All right. So the bio is how you introduce yourself to us in just a small bite size. And so I'm going to go over some best practices about how you should think about it, how you should approach it. So with the bio, there's only a few technical rules that you should adhere to. First is that you should write your bio in the third person. So instead of saying, I am an outreach and selection officer at Schwarzman Scholars, you would say, Tom Tomesco is an outreach and selection officer at Schwarzman Scholars. Something like that. Your bio should also end with your citizenship. So you can list dual citizenship, you can list one, but you should list the country that you feel most excited to represent if you have more than one and you only want to list one, but you should end with your citizenship. You should also know that we don't accept edits to your bio after you submit them. So if you are admitted to Schwarzman Scholars, this is what we will put on the website. A lot of people reach out to us asking to make changes once they're admitted. The answer is going to be no. So make sure that what you write, you're excited to represent yourself with on our website. Now, general guidance about how to approach it. I want you to bear with me as you go through an imagination exercise. Imagine your mother or other loved one is in the supermarket and they run into one of your neighbors, and your neighbor asks your mother how you're doing. And so in that moment, your mom knows that she has about 30 seconds to a minute to impress your neighbor as much as possible. So your mom's going to start with, okay, this is the company or school that my child is at. This is what they're doing. Here are the top accomplishments, and this is their vision for the future. Bam, bam, bam. And maximum impact. Your mom is proud of you. She really wants to play up your accomplishments and make you look really impressive. That is the energy you want to go for. So keep it brief. Keep it to your most proud accomplishments and include, some kind of forward-looking vision for the future. So that's my silly little way to approach the bio. But next, let's kick it over to Sarah to talk about reapplicants.
Thank you, Tom. I'm afraid I don't have an imaginary exercise for this one, but hope it'll be just as exciting. So this is a dynamic part of the application in that at the bottom of that page, you'll see the question, have you applied to Schwarzman Scholars before? If you click no, then nothing will pop up, so you don't have to fill anything out. If you click yes, then a field will appear that asks you a bit about what has changed since the last time you applied. This is not a very lengthy section. It's not an essay. And I think there's a variety of ways to approach this answer. I think it's a great starting point for folks who have reapplied before to really kind of ask themselves that question of, well, what has changed? This does not have to be anything grandiose. For some reapplicants, maybe they've been promoted at work or they've changed jobs, or they've moved to another country or another city. So there's that sort of practical component, change of venue or change of profession. For some people, they are still continuing on that same journey that they were last year, and they've been able to kind of refocus and rehone in on their leadership mission and journey, which is highly applicable to the Schwarzman Scholars application. It's important that to really kind of look through your application as a whole and see how it fits into kind of the broader story that you're telling. But this is really helpful for the admission team to just get a sense of what you've been up to for the last year, and how you're hoping to progress into the future. Again, if you're not a reapplicant, you do not have to fill out this section. You should leave it blank and answer that you have not applied before. And for our reapplicants, it's just good to know that, you are not penalized for reapplying to Schwarzman Scholars. In fact, reapplicants tend to be some of our strongest applicants in any given year. So I think it's great if you are reapplying maybe for the second time or even the third time, because I think, with each iteration, the applications can tend to get stronger. So kudos to our reapplicants and a little advice on that section. I'm going to hand it over to Tracy to talk a little bit about awards and recognitions.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So awards and recognitions. So you have an opportunity to list up to five awards and recognitions in this section. You can add brief descriptions. What's really helpful in this section is really context, right? So instead of explaining what the award is, like let us know, were you excuse me, selected as a finalist? Were you selected for this award out of 800 people? Was this a school-wide award? Was it a national award? Different things like that provide some context. It can be a volunteer recognition award, right? Were you honored for completing 100 hours? So just provide context on kind of what the award or recognition is. And it's really an opportunity for us to kind of understand what what you were recognized for and why it was meaningful to you, kind of what the selection criteria was for the award. And these will be auto sorted kind of by the most recent date. So you don't have to worry about that, but it's just an opportunity for you to reflect on kind of five awards and recognitions. I will pass it over to Nikema to talk about leadership roles.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Okay, so this is a program about leadership. How would you write about your leadership roles? What a great question. Your resume, of course, is going to be that leadership showcase. That's really going to give us a broader overview of your kind of journey up until this point. But the leadership roles section on the application allows you to dig a little bit deeper. So you have the chance to list up to five, I believe, specific leadership roles that you want to highlight and kind of to Tracy's point, give more context to. They don't need to be formal. I've had people ask, does it need to be a formalized role that I was given in order to count? But no, it can be anything that you consider a role in your life that you've been a leader. So you can give more context to the tenure in terms of how long you were in this position, explain the impact, whether that's going to be kind of a quantitative, I affected this many people, or more of a qualitative effect in terms of just how communities were shifted due to your work in that role. And they can repeat. I've had a lot of people also ask, can I repeat the same things on my resume in this section? And the answer is yes, yes, please. Since resumes aren't really going to give that space, this is really where you can expand and have more of a chance to give us all the juicy bits of your leadership journey up to this point. So I would definitely say quality over quantity. You don't feel pressured to fill out all five if that is not what you have to fill. And yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Jason to talk a bit more about recommendation letters.
Great, thank you. The recommendation letters are an essential part of the application. I say this because at Schwarzman Scholars and in previous institutions where I've done admissions, I've always been asked, do you actually review the recommendation letters? And to that I say, absolutely. We get to know you from the perspective of people who know you really well through your recommendation letters. All other parts of your application are submitted from your perspective, but the recommendation letters give us context for your accomplishments and context for the environment that you did that in. We require 3 letters of recommendation, 1 academic. We want to know what you are like as a classmate, how you excel in the classroom. 1 on your leadership. We want to hear about your leadership accomplishments, trajectory, challenges that you faced, again, from someone who has witnessed them directly. And then the third is a more open-ended recommendation. You could pick someone who could speak to your leadership ability, your academic and intellectual ability, and your character. Ideally, your recommenders are talking about all 3 of these things, but one should emphasize academics and one should emphasize leadership. One piece of advice that I give is to reach out to your recommenders early. If you haven't already, I encourage you today to go into your application and invite your recommenders to submit a recommendation through our system. The application system is the only way for recommenders to submit a letter. They cannot send it to us by email. They cannot send it to us by snail mail or traditional mail. And so it's really important that you give your recommenders as much time as possible to submit their letter for just even logistical purposes and out of the kindness of your heart. I think for recommendations, it's great to talk to your recommenders in advance, give them a little bit of information on the Schwarzman Scholars Program, but don't just have them regurgitate information that is already represented in your application. We don't need your recommenders to just regurgitate your resume, for example. Instead, it's most competitive for your recommenders to speak to specific experiences that they've had with you in your capacity as a leader and as a student. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Wyatt.
Great. Thank you, Jason, and thanks, team. I am excited to talk about the short answer question and really thinking about your perspective and how we really advise you to view this process and the opportunity to join the Schwarzman Scholars. So we really think about our admissions process not just as admitting a Schwarzman Scholar to a one-year graduate fellowship and graduate degree at Schwarzman College at Tsinghua University, but in many ways, it is much broader and much longer term than that. We're really, in many ways, inviting you as a leader and hiring you as a leader to come and join this mission for life. So as you think about applying to this fellowship and applying to this program, I encourage you to think about that from the very beginning, not just why do you want to join as a Schwarzman Scholar for a year at Tsinghua University, but why do you want to join this community of leaders from around the world and this mission that we're working on together for life, right? And that mission is incredibly relevant, obviously, to the world that we're in right now and the world that you'll be leading in the future. So through the short answer question, we really ask you, as you've learned about Schwarzman Scholars, as you potentially talked to some of our alumni, as you've watched videos and learned about the program from us and from many different perspectives around the world, we ask you to really articulate how you view the Schwarzman Scholars mission that we're working on and why you want to be a part of it. Why do you want to join this community of leaders that are committed to working together to build mutual understanding, to build connectivity, to build collaboration? That's one of the things that the world needs so desperately right now, is for leaders who are able to respect each other, listen to each other, build a common ground, and figure out how to move forward together, knowing that all the issues that we're facing as a globe, as both millennials and Gen Z moving forward and as future generations, require that countries like China and every other country around the world work together across disciplines, across industries, and across borders to come up with these solutions. So what energizes you about that? Why do you want to be a part of that? For this answer specifically, I really encourage you to make it very specific to you. So this should not just be a generic, short answer question that summarizes the mission of the program. It should be, what about this mission energizes you specifically and why? So this is a challenging essay because it is very short. It is a short word limit, but as we review the applications and as our global team of evaluators and interviewers read the application, this is a really important essay for us to really understand why you want to join this mission. So my biggest advice there is perspective-wise to view this not just as a one-year program, but as a lifelong commitment as a Schwarzman Scholar. That can really shape how you answer this question. And I also encourage you to keep that in mind for the entire application, the selection process as well. So why do you want to join this for life? I'm going to turn it over to Tom again to talk about the video.
All right. And of course, I have another imagination exercise for you. So for the video, I like to have people imagine themselves starting a new class or a new internship or a new job, and everyone around the room is introducing themselves with a fun fact. You want your fun fact to be fun and interesting. It helps people get to know your personality, but on some level, you also want it to be impressive and professional and appropriate for the setting. So that is exactly the kind of goal that we're looking for with the video. This is an opportunity for you to warm up your application, to inject some personality, some personal interest, and at the same time, add a different layer of intellectualism or intellectual curiosity or skill into your application as well. So you can show off a hobby, you can show off, maybe there's a park or like a hike that you like to go on, some facet of your life that would not otherwise be captured in your application, but still add something exciting and interesting and personal. I also want to note here, I'm sure many of you can go on YouTube and find very polished, produced videos of Schwarzman Scholars application videos. That is not necessarily what we're looking for. It does not have to have any kind of professional production or editing or polish. You can just press record on your camera and go. What's really most important is that you show that more personal side to yourself. So don't worry too much about the editing and the polish. You can do that if you want. If you're a videographer, if you're a creative person, you can get creative with it, but you certainly don't have to. So with that, I'll turn it back to Tracy.
Awesome. And I just wanted to say a note, I know Jason already spoke about the recommendation letters, but just wanted to reemphasize that if you've not spoken with your recommenders, please do. Those letters are due on September 10th, the application deadline. And so we need letters of recommendation in on that date. So if you've not spoken with them, please reach out, follow up, and you can check the status of them in your profile. So you can see if the letters have been received and all of that. So we encourage you to do that, especially as Wyatt mentioned, we are about a week out.
Awesome. Thank you, team. Super helpful, and I hope you all found that to be helpful as you think about these various sections of the application, and encourage you to take those great words of advice to heart as you work over the next few days. So as we mentioned before, we work with applicants all around the world throughout the year, and have just compiled a few of the top questions that we get at this stage of the process that we wanted to talk through. And then as we wrap this section up, we will have a few minutes to answer some questions live. I just want to start by saying we will not have a chance to answer all of your questions. I'll do my best to theme them thematically and ask my colleagues to share their insights. But before we do that, just wanted to answer some of these really commonly asked questions, which may be and are likely some of your questions as well. So Jason, I wanted to check with you first on what makes, which is a really common question for us, which is what makes for a compelling and competitive application to Schwarzman Scholars?
This is a great question, Wyatt, and one that we definitely get all the time when we're on the road. I like to start off by framing this question with context about our program, who our scholars even are. We enroll 150 scholars every year that come from all over the world. We have over 100 countries already represented in our current and alumni scholar communities, over 400 previously attended universities, and over 25 different industries with even more academic disciplines represented in the class. We're not looking for any one type of student to join our program. When we are looking at applications, we're not looking for 150 identical strong profiles. If you go to our scholar directory on our website, you can see the diversity of interests and experiences that our scholars come to before they apply to us. But at our core, Schwarzman Scholars is a global leadership development program. And as such, leadership is a foundational focus of our selection process. So each part of your application should reinforce or provide additional information about your profile as a leader in whatever field you're a part of from wherever you are in the world. Oftentimes, our most compelling and competitive applications will tie their previous experiences in leadership with their future goals, and many of them have an understanding on how Schwarzman Scholars can accelerate or enhance your journey. It's also important to say that when we're evaluating applications, there's no single most important element. We have no hard cutoffs for things like GPA, for example. Our committee is reading every part of your application in conversation with one another at the same time, essentially holistic review, if you've heard the term before. And so it's important when you're developing your application to make sure that you're spending time on each part of your application so that we can have a clear idea and a strong understanding of who you are as a leader and what your experiences have been thus far and what your goals are. In short, it's important to do your research, spend time developing your application materials, and try to enjoy the process of developing your application as much as possible. As an application reviewer, I think it always shows when a candidate enjoys the process itself.
Great advice. Thank you, Jason. And Nakima, another question that we get related to this is, what's the most important part of the application that I should pay attention to?
Well, as Jason said, and as I will also say, all the parts are important, but what I would most focus on is that bio. So as Tom talked about in the beginning, it really is kind of that first impression. It's the first thing we literally see or our reader will see when they open your application. So it really helps get a sense of, okay, where are we going? What are you interested in? And what has brought you to apply to this program today? So definitely spend time on that. The next thing I would mention is the resume, because that kind of gives you that overview snapshot of where you've been up until this point. And then kind of echoing Jason again, tying it to the future is where the essays is where I'll really look for that piece. Getting into your mind, trying to figure out, okay, what is Nikema? I know what she's done. I know what she's led. She's doing amazing things. Why does Schwarzman Scholars feel like the next step for her in what she's trying to do in the world? So those are the three things, which sounds like the whole application. Crazy. But bio, I would focus on for sure.
Awesome. Really helpful advice. Thank you, Nikema. Sarah, we get a question very commonly that about is it okay to leave some sections of the application blank? This could be awards and recognition, professional experience, education, et cetera.
Yes, great question. I definitely see that in the Q&A, so happy to address that. So the answer is that as if a field is required, you'll have to answer it in order to submit your application. But there are some sections in which they're somewhat optional. For example, in the professional experience section, we're really asking you there for you to detail your full-time work experience. So if you're an undergrad, if you're currently an undergraduate, or during your undergraduate years, if you had an internship, that would not count as professional experience. If you did some shadowing, right, as a young professional, and that was not full-time work experience, then you would not list it there. So for many of our scholars who are applying right from undergraduate, that section is blank, and that is totally fine. There is no expectation as an undergraduate that you have had full-time work experience if you were solely dedicated to your studies during that time. Another example of this is awards and recognitions that we talked about. There are 5 spaces for that. If you have 3 awards that you want to highlight or 3 leadership experiences that you want to highlight in that section, you will not be penalized. In fact, I really do encourage quality over quantity there, that they are leadership experiences or awards and recognitions that are relevant, that you are proud of, that fits within your narrative and your application, rather than sort of grasping at straws or things that might not be as relevant to you. So again, if it is a required field, we do ask that you fill it out, but having some sections blank or not entirely filled out is totally okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted, I see a lot of questions in the chat about this, and it is also very commonly asked questions that we face on the road throughout the year as well. I just want to answer several questions through this one answer, but this is related to kind of what we're looking for. What type of leader are we looking for? Someone mentioned going on the website and reading a few bios of scholars and seeing that the few that they read were founders of startups, for example. And I really encourage you over the next few days, and as you consider the program, when you read the bios of our scholars, you will find on our website the bios of our current cohort, our 10th cohort of Schwarzman Scholars, and our cohort that just graduated, our 9th cohort that graduated in July. I would be very, very intentional here to read all 300 or so of those bios, right? Don't just read 5, don't just even read 20. If you read all 150, for example, in the 10th cohort, you'll get a sense of the leadership arc, what leadership looks like in our program. And I was just there in Beijing for the last week or so with our 10th cohort for orientation and move in. And one of the things I was reminded of very personally was that in a cohort of 150 scholars, we have 150 different types of leaders. We have 150 archetypes of leadership and expressions of leadership. So in that 10th cohort that's there right now at Schwarzman College, we definitely have some founders of startups. We also have artists. We also have engineers and scientists and journalists and lawyers and future doctors. And everything in between. So the thing to remember about our program is we're not looking for a specific field or discipline of leadership. We're not looking for a specific type of leadership. We recognize that leadership looks different in every culture, every country, every field and industry, and looks different for each individual applicant to Schwarzman Scholars. So we honor and recognize that. And my biggest advice in your process, and you'll hear this a lot in our writing about the program and in our videos on YouTube, we really encourage authenticity in the process. Own your leadership narrative. That question I mentioned earlier about what question keeps you up at night? What issue do you want to solve with your career? What do you want? How do you want to impact the world as a leader? focus on that and own that. You don't need to fit yourself into a mold of what you think we're looking for. And actually the people who really own their narrative and really work hard to articulate that very personally specific to you and your essays and in your application and your interview are the ones that are successful in our process. We see that time and time again. Just on the size of the cohort, several people asked, every year we select 30 scholars from China, 60 scholars from the United States, and 60 scholars from around the world. As Jason mentioned, that network of Schwarzman scholars now is over 100 countries. So we'll typically have between 35 to 45 countries in a cohort of 150 scholars. And then one other thing I want to address that I've seen in the chat, and just another commonly asked question that we get, is about China experience. So we get China experience and also professional discipline. So we get a lot of people who first see the name of the program and see that it is based in Tsinghua University in Beijing, China, and think that, well, if I don't have direct China experience, or if I haven't studied Chinese before, I'll be at a disadvantage for the program. Definitely not the case. We're actually neutral with China experience in our process. So we're looking for leaders from around the world who are excited to join this mission and who are excited to get this firsthand experience in China. If you have China experience before, if studied abroad there, or studied Chinese, that's awesome. Let us know in the application. If you haven't, that's awesome. We love that. This is the best way to get that experience. So it is not a leg up or a leg down in the process. So please keep that in mind. Our idea is with this program very broadly and very directly is we recognize that we're looking for leaders who recognize that in the 21st century, China is going to play a leading role in the world. So our idea is let's gather these leaders from around the world, bring them to the capital of the country that will in many ways lead the 21st century, to the best university there, the Tsinghua University. And we're looking for leaders who recognize that and who want to join this mission of building connectivity and collaboration between China and the rest of the world. And this may be your very first touch point with China. I've met so many scholars in the 10th cohort in person this past week who this was their very first time to China. So it was so awesome to be there with them when they arrive for the very first time and are just starting to study Chinese. And then you've got a colleague sitting at the table with them who's been studying Chinese since elementary school, for example, or maybe a heritage speaker, for example. So it is on so the China experience is on the spectrum, just like the different expressions of leadership are as well. One other misconception that we get is people think that, oh, because they hear the name Steve Schwarzman and think, oh, Steve Schwarzman runs Blackstone, I need to have private equity or finance experience. That's one of the many different professions we have in the program. So do not in any way count yourself out, no matter what discipline you're in. And also a lot of people think, well, I need to have a background in global affairs or a background in political science or international relations to do this program. Definitely not the case as well. As I mentioned, when I was just there, I was seated at lunch one day with an engineer, with a artist, with a lawyer, for example, people from various different disciplines and industries. And this curriculum is designed to be accessible and relevant to you no matter what your professional and academic background are. And last but not least, on one clarification that I'm seeing in the chat box is just on the age requirement. So I encourage you to go to the admissions section of our website and you can find what we call our eligibility tracker. So it'll ask you several questions about not just your age, but also your several specific questions to determine your eligibility to apply through the U.S. global process of Schwarzman scholars. Our age requirement is set by the Ministry of Education in China. It's a residential program at Tsinghua University, so we have a very strict age requirement. So you'll actually be able to determine based on your birthday your eligibility for the program. You are eligible to apply straight out of your studies as an undergraduate or graduate student all the way up until 28. So we encourage you to think about when makes the most sense in your leadership trajectory. We also get that question a lot of like, when should I apply as a young professional or a straight out undergrad? That's really up to you and when makes the most sense in your leadership trajectory. So those are some of our most commonly asked questions. We are going to try to get to some of these questions in the Zoom chat, but before you want to do that, just want to talk about next steps. So after you submit your application on September 10th, we will be very busy with our global team of evaluators from around the world to select a group of candidates from our applicant pool to invite to our next step, which is called initial conversation, where we will invite a group of candidates to to just chat one-on-one on Zoom about your application. And then this is a short call. It's just a chance to get to know you more beyond what you submitted in your application and to talk through that. And then next, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk about our interviews, which will be coming up in late October. Sarah.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Wyatt. I am hard at work plugging away answers in this Q&A function. Keep them coming. There are some
Awesome.
really great questions here. Yes, so after you submit your application and we turn our attention towards interviews, you will be notified in mid-October about the status of your interview. If selected, further information will be provided in terms of location. This year we will be holding interviews in London, New York, and a virtual option. Now, I know there's some questions into the Q&A about how will I know which interview location? What if I need to change it? How do I use the virtual? So essentially in the application, you'll notice that we ask you where you will be in late October, beginning of November, because this will help us sort of map where it would be best to place you physically or virtually. We do, of course, want to find a location that is in best proximity to you. So it's not based on necessarily citizenship, but also where you are physically in the world. We understand that things happen and things come up, and you might have changed your plans. You will have the opportunity to communicate with us if you have any sort of change that you would like to make. Last but not least, we also do have a virtual option for interviews. This is near and dear to my heart since I do work on this. Because we understand to get to London and New York is not feasible for a lot of people, whether for visas or time constraints or what work commitments, what have you, and is not viewed any differently than an in-person interview. It's still conducted in the same format. It's just through your laptop computer versus in person. So rest assured, if you know you're going to not be able to make it in person, this is a very feasible option for folks. We also do not expect folks to front the cost of traveling to the interview sites. This is something that we would cover. And if you have costs associated with a visa, we will work with you on that as well. So hopefully that sets some minds at ease when it comes to that. And I'll pass it back over to Wyatt.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Super helpful. Looking forward to it. It'll be here before we know it. So, Tom, I want to turn it over to you. And we got several questions in the Q&A box about this, one of the short answer questions, which is tell us something about yourself that the admissions committee would not otherwise know based on other parts of your application. You've read so many applications over the years. Any advice on great strategies for this question?
Yeah, so I would say don't overthink it. There's nothing in particular that we're really looking for. You don't have to treat it as like a full-fledged essay where you have to provide something that we are looking for very specifically. We are giving you the space to just express something that you feel like is important for you. So maybe there's some kind of achievement or life experience that you want to articulate to us that does not fall neatly in any of the other essays. Or maybe it doesn't relate quite so neatly to your career aspirations or something like that, but you still feel is important for us to know about or to share. It's a space for you to share that kind of thing. So yeah, don't overthink it. If there's something, in the back of your mind, like, oh, I wish I had space to talk about this, that is what that essay is meant to capture.
Great. Thanks, Tom. It's really helpful. Jason, several questions in the chat box about the leadership essay. Should I focus on one example? Should I do multiple examples? Any input on or advice on how to approach that essay over the next few days?
Great question. And it's certainly an important part of the way that we evaluate leadership within the application. We're looking for candidates to really hone in on one example of your leadership, though you can enhance it with references to ways that you've learned to be a leader through that example and how that's influenced other experiences that you've had in the future. This is really your time to tell us about a challenge that you face, an opportunity that you saw, a time that you solved a problem, a place where you took initiative either as an entrepreneur, as an intrapreneur. This is the place to pick typically one example that really showcases your leadership ability and your leadership vision to define what leadership means to you and show us how you've actually lived up to that. There are lots of places in the application to speak to other leadership examples, including the leadership roles section of your application. We're going to get to know your leadership also through your resume and through your letters of recommendation. And so it's important not to feel like this is the only place to talk about all of your leadership experiences. Instead, think about this as a place to dive deep on one example that resonates with all of your previous experience collectively and may align with your future aspirations.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Tracy, turn it over to you to think about, someone asked a great question about should the extracurriculars that we highlight, all focus on the same narrative, or is it okay to include hobbies? And is it okay to include things that are non-related to the specific vision in the application?
Yeah, I definitely think if they're authentic to you and part of who you are, right? As we've been saying, we look at applicants holistically. And so we definitely obviously want to hear about extracurriculars that are related to what you want to do and kind of how it connects to your broader story. But I definitely think there are aspects of all of our personalities and being that may not directly relate, right? Like we see, music classically trained pianist and artist, and that may not be directly related to kind of their leadership narrative, but that's something that they've spent a considerable amount of time in, professionally or in undergrad. And so definitely if you've had leadership roles, kind of through some of those extracurricular activities, we definitely want to hear and see about those to kind of see who you are as a whole applicant.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. Sarah, just some great questions coming in, just thinking about the different styles of leadership, speaking to what we were talking about earlier with different expressions and different archetypes of leadership. Any advice for those with the quieter type of leadership, those who are leading with empathy, with creativity, and the leadership from the background, for example, on how to best put their best foot forward in the application?
Yes, it's an excellent question, because I think, when one thinks of a leader, that might be one sort of prototype that they have in their mind. But as I think all of us have sort of chimed in to sort of explain, is that our scholars exemplify leadership in lots of different forms. And that's what makes our program, I think, so fantastic, is that if we had everyone that was super loud and wanted to be the president of everything, nothing would get done. And I think it would be a very intolerable place. What the program I think really sets out to do is to embrace all of these forms of leadership and to have folks learn from one another. Like what are the values and what's the positives, I think, of having these different forms of leadership? What can we all learn from it? And so I think this is something that we really value when we read our applications, having scholars that exemplify all of these forms of leadership. So I think if you find yourself as someone that maybe is a little bit in the background, maybe leads with more empathy, and has this quieter form of leadership, I think it's okay to name that in your application and to draw some attention to it, although that sounds a bit paradoxical, but to name it, and I think give examples. It's always better, I think, to show rather than tell. So talk to us a little bit about what that has meant for you. Where have you been able to be a quiet leader to enact some sort of change, or some sort of movement in your community, at your university, in the world? Because I think those examples, I think, really can show us that you're the type of leader that really hopes to achieve their goals, but it's just not going to be perhaps the loudest in the room. I think also, particularly for our quieter leaders, I think letters of recommendation also really come in handy. If you're someone that doesn't necessarily like to scream their accomplishments from the top of a mountain, then have your 3 recommenders do it for you. They're the folks that can really go to bat for you, to talk about these examples and toot your horn, as the saying goes. So I think that's also a really important part of the application to lean into if it doesn't necessarily feel as comfortable. I also really encourage folks, if you're reading through your essays, and you find yourself again on the quieter side of leadership, just making sure that you're still the main character of these essays. You know, we want to learn about you. We want to learn about your ideas, your visions, your goals, what you hope to contribute to Schwarzman, and what you hope to get out of it. So having a friend or mentor also read through that to make sure that we still get to know you in those essays, I think will also be very important.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. That's really helpful. I just want to speak to one question that came in about universities. So someone mentioned here, they're looking through the university list. They don't see their university there. And I think Jason mentioned it at the beginning when talking about our network of over 100 countries. And we now have over 450 universities represented in the network. So if you look at a typical cohort of Schwarzman scholars, it's usually between 90 to 120 universities representing the cohort. So we do add universities to that cohort, to the network every single year with our new cohort. So I would say you should in no way disqualify yourself based on your own perception of the prestige or lack of prestige, and however you define that of your institution. We have universities large and small, public and private, from all around the world in our network, and we're expanding that every single year. We're not looking from people from a certain university or type of university. We're looking for leaders, and we recognize that leaders are all around the world, studying at all different types of institutions, large and small, and are doing all types of work in all different industries and sectors. So please keep that in mind. And we love it when we have new universities in our network. And it usually just takes one scholar actually to start a pipeline from a university where we start to see that interest and that momentum start. So if you're from a university that is not yet represented in the network, that's awesome. We love that, and we look forward to continuing to grow the university representation in the Schwarzman Scholars Global Network. And then I just want to follow up on the mission advice I gave earlier on that short answer question, specifically around this idea of you spending a year at Schwarzman College, advancing your specific leadership goals and your future impact. It really, as I mentioned, gets to the heart of why do you want to join this mission for life? And someone asked for further advice on that, and I really do encourage you to make this extremely specific to you. So this should be an essay, a short answer question that if we were to read it, it shouldn't make sense for anyone else, right? It should just be very specific to you. It couldn't be copied over to someone else's application and actually make sense for their application. So please keep that in mind. And let's see, I'm just going to try to get to a few more of these as we have a couple minutes left here. And then one more question related to timeline and the next steps in the process. All of us you see here represented on the screen, we're joined by an amazing team of leaders and professionals from all around the world who help us evaluate our applications over the course of the next few weeks. From different backgrounds, different perspectives and cultures and insights into leadership. So we're very grateful for that and looking forward to reviewing all the applications that come in. As we mentioned, we'll be in touch at the end of September in October about next steps for initial conversations and then interviews that will take place in late October, early November. And then we will update on admissions decisions in mid to late November. So you'll be able to finish the calendar year knowing if you were selected for a Schwarzman Scholar or not. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, we have a lot of reapplicants in our process every year, which we love. So if you apply this year and do not move forward in our process or are not selected for a scholar, we encourage you to keep in touch with us and think about keeping this program on your radar for the future, whether it be in the short or the long term. We have some people who apply the following year who may come back to us 3 to 5 years later, depending on when they're applying after further developing their leadership. So just want to recognize that and encourage you to make this the beginning of the conversation, even if you're not selected as a scholar this year. And Nikimo, one of the questions that that several people have asked, I'll ask you and ask anyone else as we wrap up who would like to share. Please feel free to. Nikimo, how do you define leadership as our newest member of the team and learning about our process and our program? How do you define leadership as we start the selection season?
That's a great question, Wyatt. I do think it's broad. I feel like in my own life, the way I've seen leadership is someone who I can talk to, someone who has goals for the future, but is not super rigid. And by the way, this is my personal definition. I don't want anyone to take this super to heart, but someone who I
Absolutely.
really rally behind and see as a visionary, someone who sees beyond just today and looks forward to the future in ways that other people might not. So yeah, anyone else want to talk about their definition of leadership?
I'll take it. I think similar to Nakima, I think it's someone, leadership is really when your actions influence others or can create meaningful change, even if it's in small ways. Whether that's through inspiring others or taking initiative, but leadership is just being able to kind of have influence and your actions create some type of change.
Awesome. And I'll just wrap up and say, I think about it, really as how have you, in addition, I love those insights from Tracy and Nakima and the team. I think about it with our process is how have you been successful at gathering a group of people around an idea that you're passionate about and care deeply about? How do you bridge the gap between perspectives? How do you motivate that group? How do you share your values with that group of people and then lead that group to accomplish something of influence and impact? Tom, when talking about our process, I love how he always talks about impact. We're really looking for impact-driven leaders who are able to have influence and tangible impact in the world. Because ultimately, as you mentioned in the beginning, this is a lifelong commitment. We're really looking to shift the geopolitical climate of the future to make the world a more collaborative and ultimately a more peaceful place. So we are inviting leaders to join us in that mission. And so it's really important for us to get a sense of your vision and your impact and your what we call demonstrated leadership to date. As you prepare your application, as we think about, inviting this next generation, this next cohort of leaders to join us in this mission. So I just want to thank you all again on behalf of our entire team for joining us today. Thank you for considering this program at a time when its mission is more important than it's ever been before. It's really inspiring and encouraging to see so many young leaders energized and motivated to join us in this mission. And I send the regards of not only our team, but our entire Schwarzman Scholars community and our 10th cohort of scholars who have just started the program. So thank you again for joining us today. Let this be the beginning of the conversation. And please note the resources that Sarah sent in the chat and be in touch with us through those 2 email addresses if you have any questions or issues over the course of the next 7 days. So with that, we'll wrap up today. Thanks again. I'm sorry we're not able to get to everyone's question, but I hope you found this helpful. And we look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.